So imagine, for those that are not females, to all men out there that are watching or listening to this, imagine you're a woman and you're going to a doctor's office to have some of your, I guess we could say, your intestines checked out and things like that, places having to do with more of the center to midsection of your body. And I don't mean any disrespect by saying that, I'm just trying to phrase it in the most polite way possible. So anyways, you'll see why I'm giving this example. You head to the doctors, but you live in a town that's very remote, by the way. It doesn't have to be in America, it could be anywhere in the world. You live in a very, very remote town. And what ends up happening is a lot of people in that town say, the doctor in this town is a little bit shady, and he or she as the doctor has been known to disappear on these random trips or events, if you will. And it's kind of like nobody asks any questions, because when you go see the doctor, are they a weird person? Yes, but they do end up helping you medically, so everyone lets it slide. It's not your business, right? What ends up happening, and you'll see why I bring this up, but what ends up happening is that you say to the doctor, listen, I'm having an issue going to the restroom, letting it out, if you will, and I think it has to do with my bowels or my rectal tract or you name it, right? So the doctor ends up doing his medical inspections, what have you. Next thing you know, he looks up and then his face turns purple. And then all of a sudden, you hear him say, "Loosh, loosh," but he's yelling it. Next thing you know, I kid you not, you feel as if you're in a dream, literally in a dream, and then all of a sudden, everything around you disappears, and then all you see is this big bright light that is surrounding you, and you have no idea what to do. Next thing you know, you get knocked out unconscious. Next thing you know, you wake up, you're on what seems to be a medical table, but you have all of these gray aliens inspecting you. Now, before I go into that, let me just say that we do have a Patreon. It does help support the show. For those that may have felt a little bit uncomfortable with the example I just gave, please bear with me. You'll understand why I had to sort of give that example, and there's no other way for me to put this. I'm all about being respectful, but sometimes we have to call things like they are, so I'm just trying to find an even keel there, if you will. But anyways, let's jump into it. First off, Project Gwen, harvesting rectal... I can't say it publicly, for blue beam infusion. So, what does Gwen stand for? It stands for a few different things, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, let's take a look at mayoclinic.org. So, rectal prolapse occurs when part of the large intestine's lowest section, or rectum, slips outside the muscular opening at the end of the digestive tract, or in other words, the anus, right? The prolapsed rectum can cause fecal incontinence. Rectal prolapse can sometimes be treated with stool softeners, suppositories, and other medications, but surgery is usually needed to treat rectal prolapse, end quote. Now, the reason why I gave the example at the beginning of you being a woman, especially if you're not a woman or a female watching this, is because generally speaking, it is a fact that rectal prolapses tend to occur 6 times more often in women than men. That's just biology. Unfortunately, that's just a fact, and that's just the way things are, right? Now, the reason why I bring this up is because women in general have much more of an astute and in-tuned formation with an energetic correspondence of the universe, if you will. But this is not necessarily an esoteric episode, but you'll see where I'm going with this. So let's take a look right here. Bibliothecaplades.net. The ultimate point of the conspiracy, harvesting energy from the human farm. So, when looking at the headlines each day, it's useful to take a step back and sometimes ask yourself, why? What's the point of all this control? The NWO, or the New World Order conspirators, have all the money, wealth, and prestige they could want, which is another thing too, by the way. They have more money they could ever spend within like 50 lifetimes. So anyways, some of them are international bankers that own the money printing press and could literally print what they wanted. Some of them will never have enough time to spend all their money. At a certain point, the game is not about money. It's about power, and it's about energy, or more specifically, human energy. It's about setting up a system where people at the top sit around all day managing the human farm while their economic or literal slaves do all the work to benefit the controllers, end quote. Now, what's interesting about this is that people will say to me, "Hey Dave, I already know this," but take a look here, folks. NW-owned corporations are the middle managers in this equation. They are the physical conduits through which human energy is funneled upwards. So now, this is when we're going to get to the loosh, which is allegedly, depending on who you ask and things like that, food for the archons or part of a mass correspondence of a faction that controls a lot of the elites. Not everyone, but a lot of them. But anyways, let's take a look. Loosh is defined by the Urban Dictionary. So again, we're now connecting mainstream media, references with the whole quote-unquote conspiratorial realm. So we're seeing the validity already. Is defined as an energy generated by all organic life in varying degrees of purity. The clearest and most potent coming from humans, engendered by human activity. Shocking as it may seem, humans are not at the top of the food chain. So anyways, reportedly, the light being told Monroe, which is a journalist, that when humans die, their energy is released and harvested by trans-dimensional beings who use it to extend their own lifespans. Again, the claim is that the universe is a garden created by these beings as their food source. According to Monroe's story, animals are intentionally positioned on this planet to feed on plants and on each other, thereby releasing the life force of their victims so it can be harvested. End quote. Now, before I go on, I just want to say that for those that may be doubting this or anything like that, it doesn't have to necessarily be what you would define as the archons, but the correspondence in which I'm trying to associate all of this here has to do with this right here. And this is according to newsintact.com. A physicist claims that everyone can become a hologram and we don't realize it. The statements of Professor Brian Cox, a British physicist, stunned viewers of the morning show this morning. The scientist explored a strange theory of human origins, according to the Daily Mail, suggesting that each individual may be a hologram. End quote. Now, before I go on, I just want to say, folks, this is one of the many things that will enlighten us or allow us to become more aware, if you will, of the concept of the way in which certain apparatuses happen, because this is one of the things that is right in front of us, that is being hidden. It is not only our internal abilities, if you will, but the reason why I bring up the whole concept of the rectal tracts and all that is because when we take a look at animal and human mutilations, more so humans, notice that rectal tracts always seem to be missing. Now, there's a correspondence with a lot of this, but let's carry on because this is very important. The physicist said that the universe might not be what everyone believes it to be based on textbooks. By addressing the questions that Stephen Hawking asked more than 50 years earlier, we came to the conclusion, and yeah, I can say it out loud and stop, that we can be holograms. All right? End quote. Okay. The reason why I bring this up, folks, is because we have to understand that when President Eisenhower in the 1954 Greada Treaty met with different alien species, certain ones were actually able to control their mind and actually use, I kid you not, their own minds to change the physical construct of their own bodies. Now you might be saying, Dave, maybe they have some type of nanotechnology that allows this. How can you say for certain that this is completely natural? Well, I'm very glad that you asked. So let's take a look right here. Scitecdaily.com. Clock experiment shows a fundamental connection between energy consumption and accuracy. Interesting and funny enough that this comes out on May 11th, 2021 of this year, at the time that I'm recording this too, by the way. What are the odds? So anyways, a new experiment shows that the more energy consumed by a clock, the more accurate its timekeeping. Clocks pervade every aspect of life, from the atomic clocks that underlie satellite navigation to the cellular clocks inside our bodies. Now, the scientists found that the more heat they supplied, the more accurately the clock ran. Does this not remind you of a human being? The more energy you give it, the better they perform. The more you take out of it, the more depressed, depraved they become, and things like that. Again, the rectal tract is being removed for different hybridization experimentations having to do with the energy feeding of, again, the Orion Dracos, the Archons, the different interdimensional beings that are currently fighting a cosmic battle or war, if you will. But let's carry on. The scientists found that the more heat they supplied, the more accurately the clock ran. In fact, the accuracy was directly proportional to the heat released. interesting, right? We're missing something in the domain of public science, medicine, and biology that is clearly being hidden from us. To make the clock twice as accurate, they need to supply twice as much heat. Now, it's not so much about the literal application of the heat here, but we can ask ourselves, how come this is not being studied on human beings? Now, people might say, well, the counter argument will be, well, who's going to volunteer to do this? Oh, I can bet you a lot of people seriously will, especially nowadays. People need the money. Now, I'm not trying to say that we should experiment on human beings. What I'm trying to say is that the disclosure of the public domain of the way in which this is being filtered through is something that is using drop feeding. And for those who don't see it, it's very clear. This article right here that just came out as of the day I'm basically recording this could not be more clear that it is in fact drop feeding. But anyways, their study, published in Physical Review X, is the first time that a measurement has been made of the entropy or heat loss generated by a minimal clock. The subject, according to Edward Laird of Lancaster University, which, by the way, members will talk about that later because I can't really discuss that publicly, but the subject of thermodynamics, which incorporates the most fundamental principles of nature, tells us that there are two types of machines that we cannot operate without releasing heat. One is the mechanical engine, which releases heat to do work, and the other is the computer memory, which releases heat when it rewrites itself. End quote. Notice something here, folks. Notice that even though humans in theory invented the computer, the concept of the computer in correspondence to the Teotihuacan Mexican pyramids, hopefully I said that correctly, my god, if I butcher that, I'm sorry, then what we're going to find is that it's no fluke that when looking at it from an aerial point of view, and for those that have watched Ancient Aliens, 10, 12 years ago, you'll know what I'm talking about here, actually is identical to that of a modern day computer CPU, because it is not by human design or by coincidence or fluke. It is by the laws of free will that allows for the louche to energetically curate a form of energy that cannot be bent, which is something that direct energy weapons use as well too. But again, we have to understand that this is the concept we're perceiving, if you will, because this all comes down to the concept of the perception in which we believe that quantum physics can interact with that of quantum entanglement through quantum healing. A lot of quantums in there, I know. But what we're seeing here, again, I apologize that I keep referring back to this, but I think it's very important. Looking back to Project Woodpecker, okay? Understanding that the different correspondence of, again here, a New World Order or One World Government patent having to do with a method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and or magnetosphere. And it was a patent done in August 11th, 1987. It explains and describes the electron cyclotron resonance heating method that is presently being covertly and cooperatively used by the two superpowers to help bring about the New World Order or the One World Government, if you will. Now, end quote. Before I go on, I just want to say, look at this right here, electron cyclotron resonance heating. Does this not seem similar to that of the Schumann resonance? That NASA says, oh, we can't figure it out. But we know that at some point there seems to be some type of electromagnetic gravitational heartbeat or pulse, if you will. They'll never say heartbeat because that is the way in which they do it with drop feeding from a psychological perspective. They can't give us too much of the truth. But again, what's happening here is that the rectal, I guess you could say, again, I have to be careful. Maybe I let it slip already, but the rectal, if you will, are being used for the infusion of a blue beam One World Order invasion. Now, I want to say this very carefully because a lot of people might say to me, Dave, we've asked you about blue beam and on live streams and even one-on-one, you've told me you don't believe that there's going to be one big invasion, if you will, and I still subscribe to that. Why? Because I believe blue beam will be relative. If it were to occur, and I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, will be relative to the perception in which people themselves are seeing it, because according to quantum physics, the reality is truly in the eye of the beholder, and we've seen that similar to the way in which President Eisenhower was able to watch these aliens change their body shapes, which we've seen in this article right here, because again, through this clock experiment, if you emit enough heat and enough frequential energy between the consumption and accuracy of the corresponding space-time continuum, you can change the parts of your body not only for yourself, but for others too. So, if there were to be some form of a blue beam invasion, if you will, and for those who don't know very quickly, Project Blue Beam is essentially this idea that there's going to be a staged alien invasion to create a one world government and sort of keep all of humanity under a one world technocratic top-down control, which does not sound really that far out there when you really delve into what's happening in reality today. What we're going going to find here is that it's actually using human energy to harvest us using, again, Project Gwen. Now, for those that might be saying, what does Project Gwen stand for? I'm very glad you guys asked, because I should have mentioned this earlier if I didn't already. Gwen stands for Ground Wave Emergency Network. However, it has also been strongly rumored to also stand for Ground Wave Enslavement, etheric or esoteric network. And the reason for that is because when you emit these light pulsars that keep being emitted in correspondence with the Earth's heartbeat, as we've seen in a minuscule and microcosm form of an example through citecdaily.com of this clock experiment, showing the more heat you put towards it, the more accurate it is, excuse me. What you're going to find here is that when these mutilated bodies are being used for their rectal, what ends up happening is that within the deep underground military bases, this is a form of loosh that is being given to the Greys, which are then handing them off to the hybrids and to the other soulless humans. And then on the other side of things, what's also happening is that they're fusing the rectal blank with other extraterrestrials' rectal blanks to create a superior super soldier, if you will. Now, you might be saying, Dave, what's the super soldier being used for? Well, the super soldier would never be used in the case of a public scenario where if there's some type of ground war or something. The concept of the super soldier, believe it or not, is that to deceive us by the two words super and soldier. They're trying to make another version of a... I don't want to use this example so explicitly, but I feel like for the sake of conversation right now, I don't have any other way to put it. They want to create a false messiah, if you will, a false prophet. Now, the whole concept behind this, we can say Allah, Jesus, respectfully, right? But the concept behind this is that this super soldier will be able to curate electromagnetic frequencies and in ways that we would still, in today's modern era, deem to be magic, right? But the whole point is to get the energy focused on this one particular super soldier that may in fact be the form of drop feeding in relation to the Blue Beam project that may fake an invasion, but in a very different way. And again, thanks to my friend Rumors of Instinct, if we look all around us, Blue Beam is already happening in many different ways. So to say there's some massive alien invasion that might occur, look, it might, but I highly doubt it because of what I'm seeing here through the connections and data points that are occurring. So it's essentially being made to create a false prophet, if you will, that in turn would then result for the direction of people's energy and focusness. Is that even a word? Energy and I guess you could say focused attention, to be directed towards that particular individual, which feeds and translates to loosh within the deep underground military bases. And again, it turns people away from knowing what's going on underground and things like that. People are focused on what's happening on the surface, and then that's it, right? It just goes to show, in general, it's not that hard to deceive the public to even begin with, right? So let me know what you guys think, and we'll catch you very, very soon. Thank you. Cheers.